Well, I have been in the space of human resources for over 25 years. And, pursuing a career in human resources was not something that I had thought about as a youth. I don't know that anyone grows up thinking, hey, I want to work in human resources. It just happened to be the space that I fell into. I was in the Army Reserves, and after coming out of the Army Reserves, initially having been a biology major, I knew for certain that biology wasn't my space, but I wasn't clear yet on what my space was going to be. So I took a temp job with Wells Fargo, and it was there that I met two incredibly life-changing people. One was the head of talent development. The other was the general head of HR, and gave me an opportunity to spend time with both of them to understand the space of HR, what it meant. And it fed that sort of humanitarian spirit within me, which I've always had. So I took a full-time role in the talent department. My first role in HR was as a recruiter, and I loved it. And it gave me an opportunity to not only do talent acquisition or recruiting, but it also gave me an opportunity to start to build some training skills. From there, I left Wells Fargo after a couple of years, took another role. So then I went to Quest Diagnostics. I met another amazing person who pushed me beyond my level of comfort and acknowledged that I was great at recruiting and great at training and development, but wanted to broaden me a bit and expose me to a more general HR role, to which I was initially resistant, but eventually took on the challenge. And that really sparked my career as an HR business partner. And that's the space that I've been in ever since. So I've been fortunate in that I've benefited from having great mentors, great supporters, and at times individuals who believed in me and my ability than I believed in myself at a point in time. There have been numerous instances where, I wasn't sure that I was in the right space. I wasn't sure that I was doing the right work. And I had my own plan. And then I often say that, we plan and life has a way of sort of laughing at those plans. And so I had my own plans in terms of what I wanted to do. And every time I was ready to prematurely step away from an organization in pursuit of something else, a greater opportunity presented itself. And, the last organization that I was with, I was there for 15 years. And I remember being there for a year. And actually, let me take a step back. Before I joined the organization, I was reluctant to join, and I had declined the offer. And after some additional conversations, I decided, okay, perhaps this is a great opportunity for me. I'll move forward. And so I did. And a year in, I thought, okay, this has been great, but I don't feel like I'm able to contribute in the ways in which I'd like to contribute. I don't feel like I'm growing at the pace that I'd like to grow and develop. So I'm going to start pursuing other opportunities outside of this organization. And just as I started to have those thoughts, internal opportunities began to present themselves. And so I was given an opportunity to promote, move to another state, work under a different leader, and learn some amazing things from that leader. That leader then decided shortly thereafter that they were leaving the organization, which then sparked those thoughts in me again to say, okay, well, this is a sign. And then a new leader was introduced and gave me the opportunity to work under this leader in a different capacity. And so I had a tremendous working relationship with that individual, learned an extraordinary amount, contributed an extraordinary amount, and I felt like I've accomplished a lot. Maybe now is my time. Point being that over the course of 15 years, every time I thought it was my time to do something else, an opportunity presented itself internally where I could contribute in a different way. And 15 years later, the universe and I finally agreed that it was time to step away and do something else. And so I took that leap. and I'm currently serving as Chief HR Officer for a foundation in New York City. The important thing is to make sure that along the journey, you're continuing to learn and you're also having an opportunity to add value. And I think if both of those buckets are getting filled for you, then you're not wasting your time. But you want to make sure that you are gaining as well as giving throughout your journey. You know, it goes without saying that 2020, even now going into 2021, the first 30 days of 2021 have been difficult for a lot of people. Difficult for a variety of reasons. There have been job loss, there has been loss of life, there has been separation from friends and family, there has been the wearing of multiple hats, having to be, you know, the employee, the caretaker, the lunch lady or lunch person, and all of those roles that we have been able to have other people play for us in our lives. When everyone's at home together, you get to wear all of those hats and you feel still that you have to give 100% to each of those, which is an impossibility. And so it has caused a lot of stress on people at levels that I don't think a lot of employers were prepared to really manage through. And I've seen a lot of emotional decline, unfortunately, from employees during this time, just being isolated away from their colleagues, away from their family and friends has really had a significant impact on people's mental health over this period of time. And so as an HR leader, as an employer, there's been lots of emphasis on how to support people through this time in ways that they can balance work and life through COVID. So what does that look like from navigating your healthcare perspective? What does that look like from managing your finances? What does that look like in terms of tapping into resources that the company made available to you to help support your mental health? I also have a tendency to focus on the positives. And with every circumstance, there's always some glimmer of positivity that I think can be gleaned. And when I reflect on COVID and the opportunities that it's presented, I think that it will open up an entire avenue of employment opportunities that may not have been accessible to those pre-COVID. You know, culturally, there are still a lot of companies that are married to having their employees on site or within a particular geographic location. And once COVID hit and we were all thrusted into this work from home environment, those formerly traditional companies have begun to learn that work can get done if you have the right tools, technologies, and infrastructure in a remote environment. And so now what that does is it opens up, it widens the aperture in terms of candidates that we would look at and consider for roles that perhaps we would not have considered in the past. So if you are interested in an organization that is in New York City, but you may not have an appetite or ability to move to New York City, well, it doesn't discount that company as a prospective employer for you, because now that company may be likely to consider you no matter where you are geographically. I think that if you are an entrepreneur, this is a great time for you to start thinking about what the gaps are that companies need, or even employees need to fill as they are working in this remote environment. What are some technologies that could use some enhancement, or what are some technology solutions that don't quite exist that maybe you've got the ability to create? So this is a great time to really start to assess gaps, to address needs that we didn't have prior to 2020, and start finding solutions for those gaps. I think that this is really the time for organizations to have their culture defined, because how they've shown up for their employees during this time really speaks volumes to who they are at their core. And, you know, if you've got employers that have not demonstrated any modicum of empathy toward their employees and their circumstances, and have not been willing to be flexible and understanding beyond, their normal policies and procedures, that would give me cause for concern. I mean, if there was ever a time that companies needed to lead with empathy, this is absolutely that time. Again, I know that it's easy to get caught up in all of the challenges that we've all been faced with in this past year or so. But I think that if we can shift our focus for just a moment on the opportunities, I think that we'll realize that there is something positive that can be gained from this experience. I maintain that you can't go through something this life-changing and not grow from it in some meaningful and measurable way. Women do a lot. We wear a lot of hats naturally, right? So we are in the C-suite, we are executives, we are leading teams, we're leading organizations, we're leading ourselves, and then we're leading, our families, and we're taking care of children. And there was a point in time where it was believed that you can't have it all. You can. But it is important for the employer to understand the demographics that exist within their organization and who it is they're employing. And are there policies and ways of working that allow people who are balancing these work-life circumstances to be able to thrive in the workplace? And so there are concepts like work sharing, flexible hours, not having to work the traditional 8 to 5 or 9 to 5, but just making clear what the deliverables are for the role and allowing people to deliver on those expectations during hours that allow them to balance their work and life. So I would encourage employers, as they look at the external landscape and understand how many women there are in the workforce. Do you have ways of working? Do you have policies? Do you have an approach to working that would allow women to be attracted to you as a prospective employer and be able to balance all the other things that are important to us? Because when you think about the traditional work environment, I don't know that it was necessarily built for women. If the expectation is that you work Monday through Friday, that you travel 75% of the time, that works if there's potentially a caretaker at home that's caring for your children. But oftentimes we are the caretaker at home that's taking care of the children. So how can I be a successful executive and also be a successful wife and mother? So as an employer, do you have work policies and ways of working that would support and enable that? And so when the inevitable conversation about sports came up at the table, that I would have an opportunity to be a part of those conversations and jump in and be one of the guys. So I did that. I took her advice and I got the subscription to Sports Illustrated and I read it. Didn't like it because I'm not into sports. It's just not who I am. And that inevitable conversation did occur. We were preparing for the start of a meeting and everyone was, assembling, and we were there early. And they started talking about some sporting event that took place over the weekend. And I started to try to recall what I read in Sports Illustrated. And what came out of my mouth was, I don't like sports. And that was not what I intended to say, but that's what came out of my mouth. And the reason that that's what came out of my mouth is because that is what was true and authentic to me. The reality is I'm not one of the guys. And it's clear that I'm not one of the guys. So pretending to be one of the guys was a very thin veneer that would have quickly been seen. People would have saw through that quite quickly. So I learned that the best way that I could do and be my best was to be myself, to honor my true authentic self. I'm not one of the guys. I don't like sports, but I can show you why I've earned my seat at this table. And I will be a great partner. I will be a great collaborator. I will be a great contributor. But more importantly, I will be a great mentor to those that look like me, that aspire to sit in the same seat that I'm sitting in. And the only way that I can be that to them is to honor who I am and be true to myself. Throughout my course of my career, I've had people give me all kinds of advice on how I should be and how I should act and how I should behave and how I should dress, because these are the things that are expected of women in business. And some advice is good advice, but advice that feels like it's taking you out of who you are authentically is likely not good advice. Some things are meant to hone you and shape you. Other things are meant to change you, and there's a difference. And so you've got to come to grips with knowing and understanding and appreciating and loving who you are, understanding what your strengths are, and really focusing on building those and helping other people to get to where it is you are. And how are you giving back? How are you inspiring others? How are you serving as a mentor? Because as I said at the beginning of this conversation, I attribute much of my success to those that looked like me, that were willing to reach back and support me and give me honest, candid feedback and support. And if I didn't have that, I would have struggled probably a lot more than I did to get to where I am. And so I'm committed to being that for other women. You know, if I could have given this advice to my younger self, I would have, which is the best investment that you will ever make in your life are the investments that you make in your own development and your own growth. So honor who you are, take time to understand what your strengths are. You won't be good at everything, but there are some things that you will naturally excel at. Take the time to understand what those are, hone those, embrace those, and continue to invest in the development of those, and then use those gifts in service to others.